Meeting of the Harbor Shellfish Advisory Board is called to order, June 5th, 5:05. Approval of the agenda. If I may. Motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Minutes of May 15th. So everybody had a chance to look at them. Any comments, changes? Motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Please note our next meetings, we'll be having, we will be having the summer schedule, one meeting July, one meeting in August. I'm gonna wait to talk about the maintenance dredging, so a little later, and give the floor to Sheila. Marine Department report, please.
Okay, so we have started our ACE navigation. We have the buoys in from Jackson's Point to Beal Point. We have buoys in from up to the head of the harbor. And we have adjusted some of the buoys in Pulvis. We need to finish Pulvis and finish Nantucket Harbor, and then Beal Point, and then the rocks across the North Shore. We have till the 15th from the Coast Guard. They've extended it for everyone because everyone experienced so much damage from these March storms. So they basically gave us till July 1st. I think that we're going to be able to make our June 15th deadline. If we don't, we'll be putting something out via social media, and also 97.7. I'll get hold of the Yankee and everything else, but I'm pretty confident that we can meet our deadline and meet the Coast Guard requirement of June 15th to have everything established. Nantucket Harbor, we ended up having to add a couple of buoys. I think where it reached that Millie's this winter caused a lot of sanding right around Middle Neck. So we brought it almost to straight across from Jackson's Point. We added 2 greens, so we're up to number 29 in One's Landing Nantucket Harbor buoy. The head of the harbor looks pretty much the same. Pulvis, we're able to find a guzzle, but it is just a guzzle. So I think that we're going to be able to provide the mariner with 2.5 feet at low tide, which for the outboards is going to be okay, but anybody with an inboard is going to have some issues. The shoal off of the western point, as you go in right around where 3, 5, and 6 are, has extended quite a bit. But I think we're going to be able to find you guys. It's going to be really zigzag getting through there. But the outboard boats are going to be able to get in and out, I believe, at all times. Town pier, the floating dock, we just completed a meeting with the slip holders from the floating dock to tell them what our intentions are for replacement and the repairs that were made. There was some concerns that we didn't drop a whole bunch of money into it, but that's because we have the full intention of ripping it out in the fall. So basically we band-aided it back together. And I think we did a really good job of getting it done and getting it open so that they were there and going. We did find an additional break in it today. So we're continuing to monitor it, we're continuing to find things, and we're repairing it on the spot. We found the break this morning, it was repaired this afternoon. It was on the inside, so it wasn't visible until we pulled the boards. We have one more finger that we're kind of struggling with. It's a little, I don't like where it's sitting. We made a couple adjustments to it, but that hasn't worked, so we're gonna try a couple other things, but we'll continue to maintain it. We were able to get the plumber to run water to both the end of the fixed pier and the end of the floater, which was a concern. The pump out pipe underneath is just almost 99.9% repaired. We should be ready to take pump outs at the end of the dock this week, starting this weekend. The pole basin has been handling them for us. Headhunters back from Crosby and ready to go. As soon as we get that pump in, at the end of the pier, and again, we're working diligently to make sure that that's a possibility. We have been able to meet all pump out needs. There's not that many boats on moorings yet. So we're doing okay as far as that goes. The fixed pier, AGM came in and replaced, some of the batter boards at the end of the wave barrier. They replaced, I would say, probably 6 pilings. On the fixed pier, they replaced 2. On the floor, they replaced the remainder of what we asked for, what was broken. So the fixed pier is in good shape. We've been replacing dockboards. We continue to replace dockboards as we need to throughout the summer. But the slip holders are in the process of being notified that they are welcome to come and take their slips. And those that were anxious to get there, we've accommodated. And if they weren't in their permanent slip, we found another slip for them to go into. So no one has been denied the opportunity to go to the town. Even the floating dock guys, we let them stay on the fixed pier until the floating dock was ready. So there was no disruption in the length of time that somebody was on the town pier as far as leases and stuff like that. So we made ourselves available for that. On the beaches, we're finishing up with beach cleanups. We've got the lifeguard stands going out today to 90% of the beaches. We're having some issues with Cisco Beach, so we need to work with the land bank on, just for beach access. It's got a double cliff going down it, and so for safety reasons, we want to change the access to where we're going to direct the public to get on and off the beach. But again, that's a land bank property, so we need to work directly through them. Moorings, we got our computer back from the NPD from the IT, and so we're ready. We'll be able to be doing really good audits out there. And those mooring inspections are gonna start. We've been doing mooring inspections for people before they put them in, but we're gonna start checking the balls and in the positions and the names, and make sure that the right boats are on the right moorings. We intend on really tightening that up this year because we have had some issues. We have one boat that remains. It's on private property. It's on the beach. The private property owner is really pushing to have the town remove it, but it is on private property, so it falls into his lap. He only takes care of that. We're trying to assist him the best we can to find the owner of that boat. Liveaboards, we're working with them. So far, I really haven't heard from too many yet, but we're going to be tightening up on that as well. And as far as the no anchorage goes, we did have the no anchor buoys in place around Husky Shoal for Memorial Day, so we did not have any issues with Fugawi. Nobody has been anchoring in there. And when we went to go put the no anchor buoys in, it's very clear where the shoal is and where the eelgrass is. We stayed clear, we made sure we stay outside of it. But there is a really good amount of eelgrass there. Also, as far as eelgrass goes, there's probably 2 dumpsters full of it in front of the town pier that I'm working with the DPW to get out of there. They need to take the skid machine. We took pitchforks and piled it all up so that they can come and get it in and take it away. But we're missing some eelgrass. The storms did quite a bit of damage to them. while there was no warrants in water, or while there was nothing else, it was pure storm damage. For the earthworks that's up there. We have issued, I think we issued 25, 26 and under moorings. We did not issue any large boat moorings, because I want to take a look and see what we have there, see what we have for holes and what areas that we're taking up. And that's pretty much it. Our next marine event, we have an Ironman.
Yep.
Our next marine event will be the Ironman, which is probably in a couple of weeks. And they're working with them for the triathlon. The lifeguards, our head guards will start their training on Monday the 11th. They do 40 hours of emergency responder training. The weekend they do ATV training. And then on the 18th we start our beach training, which usually lasts 10 days. And that would be for all the new guards or returns that are not head guards. We're at full staff. We were able to get plenty of lifeguards. We're again one of the only communities that was able to be able to fully staff our thing. And I really think that our USLA certification is helping us with that. And it's allowed us to choose, qualified lifeguards. Meantime, I'm doing a junior lifeguard program, and again, we've had several requests. We have 3 new lifeguards on staff this year that are graduates of the junior lifeguard program. So that program is paying off for us as well, and so we intend to continue with that. And last thing is, we're doing a junior boat operators course. We've been doing that every year. We've been qualifying about 15 Nantucket kids that are ages like 12. If you're under the age of 16, between 12 and 16, state of Massachusetts, you have to have a junior operator's license to operate a boat by yourself. And this will be like the 8th or 9th year that we've done it, and we already have a full class.
Sheila, lifeguards aside, your staff, do you have summer help, extra summer help, and
Yes, we have 10 dock attendants that help us with the transient boats. They take care of they help us with a lot of the maintenance stuff. They're kids, but they, a lot of them are returners. They're college age, and then we have a lot of returners that have been around. Handle it pretty well. We have enough to operate the headhunter, but it's always good. We always just keep bringing in new so that we can grow. When we get them, we try to keep them through like the last 2 years of high school, and then hope for the 4 years that they're going through college. So we get 6 years of investment out of them after, the first summer of training. So we do have, and again, we have a wait list of kids that want to work there.
are they able to assist in patrolling mooring field also?
Absolutely, yeah, especially the kids that have been around for a bit. They are qualified to take our boats, and they go out. That's probably one of the biggest things they do. They do mooring enforcement. They do no wake enforcement, which is huge. They do enforcement as far as paddle craft, making sure everybody has life jackets. They do a lot of the safety patrols for us. And they're both in Nantucket and out in Nantucket Harbor. And we try to have a boat on the water at least, 4 to 6 hours a day. Doing those type of patrols. For Gaui, we did not have any issues, but we had an issue with the way the race was set up. Had them cutting across. We like them to put on the west side of the channel, the red side of the channel, and have Ferries run the green side of the channel. the Coast Guard and Harbor Master will, escort the ferry in and out to get, just to push the sailboats over to one side. Problem was it had the committee boat on the east side this year, so they had to cut across the channel to get to the west side. We were able to work that out, and I did speak at length with the race committee guy, afterwards, and he ensured us that next year he'll set the committee boat up on the west side, so it won't be a problem. They were all extremely cooperative, nobody gave us a hard time, and once we started pushing them, they got the message pretty quick, on where to go and to stay out of the ferry's way. The ferries were great, patient, no problems. There was a lot of boats coming in at one time like it always is, but it's pretty organized, chaos.
And I noticed that the harbor wasn't as full as last year. And
Well, there was probably two to fours right at the entrance. So anybody in open boat was getting trashed, ourselves included, with the wave height that was there. It was opposing tide and wind, so it was standing right up at on the Nantucket bar there, across the entrance. So I think that kept a lot of people, and it was very windy.
his forecast was 15 to 25. I was just wondering if, because usually for Fagawi, we get not only do we get the Fagawi sailors, but you get all the people who just sail over a motor over the weekend.
Yeah, I didn't notice as much of that. I agree with you. The only thing we had, again, no problem with Fagawi is we probably stopped, I'd say 8 or 9 kayakers that didn't have life jackets that were paddling with the wind, so they had zero clue as to that they were never going to be able to make it back. Yes. So
Out of the harbor?
yeah, or wherever, or way up harbor. I mean, a lot of times we end up grabbing them way up by the wall winded, and they leave from like Francis Street.
Any other pertinent questions?
When you said for Iron Man, do you mean Iron Teams? I thought,
Yeah, I guess it's Iron Teams.
I thought that was on and then that was off. And
Sometimes, yeah, like, I never know.
Okay.
They didn't have them,
last I heard it wasn't on, but
that's great with us.
okay. And then I know this is probably a bit out of our jurisdiction, but I'm wondering about the stranded Bellevue north of Quidnet.
The stranded Bellevue North Quidnet is a Coast Guard issue.
Okay.
And their issue is, procurement, like everything else, government procurement. And, I'm afraid that there's gonna be birds or something there right now, or whatever.
So is it,
I know Steve Waterhouse is looking at doing it, but he was working with the Coast Guard Procurement Office to make sure that he had the right insurances and the right everything to do with government. I think the plan was, before it turned to this time of year, was they were gonna pick it up, put it on a truck, drive it down to the steamship or Children's, put it in the water, and the Grant Point's, small boat was gonna tow it out to a buoy center that was waiting on the harbor. I don't know if that's gonna be possible with all the traffic we have now. So there are other options to get a Chinook helicopter and just fly it off, and then they drop it in the middle of the Nantucket Sound. Who's gonna pick it up?
Rich.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know whether you mentioned this or not, but the bridge in Nantucket and the sanding that's going on, toward the bridge, are we just going to let nature take its course, or is there any other plan to deal with that infill toward the bridge?
That's not
your area?
in, I don't know if the DPW director or like natural resources or
Okay.
somebody like that.
Okay.
Would know that, but I just worry about what it's doing to the water depth.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Sheila.
Well,
Thank you.
Thanks.
Not
Enjoy your
seeing-
summer.
Thank you. You as well.
Not seeing natural resources, public comment. Any questions? I'm going to jump ahead to new business and hear from Mr. McNeil. I've asked Mr. McNeil to come in and update us on his plans, how things are going with sewer, stormwater runoff, landfill operations pertaining to Long Pond possibly, and any possibilities of, or what plans are for the future. If you would.
So thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here.
I just want to make sure I'm very clear up front that sewer is not my responsibility. It's
All right.
the sewer director's responsibility, but that said, our discussion was more centered around dealing with the sewer force tank failure, which was involved with rehabilitation that we're getting that back up and running. So I'm happy to speak to that.
Just give you this. I can hear Sheila fine, but sure.
Thank you.
Shortly after the January 4th sewer force main failure on South Beach Street, we got the Emergency Operations Center up and running here in this building and started to address the issues at hand. Obviously, it was published about 2 million gallons of raw wastewater discharged into the harbor. I would say at the time that the sewer department did a fantastic job in assembling a makeshift grit chamber to capture over a ton of the debris from that sewer waste stream to basically clean it up as much as possible. And we confirmed the lack of a debris field with a diver once the ice came out. So timing-wise, something like that is never a good time, but timing-wise with the water temperature as cold as it was, really was a help as opposed to a hindrance. And so there was sampling done at multiple locations up and down the coastline. But during that process, and we did watch the expected spike in nutrient levels, but we also noticed that they fell off very quickly. And so that was good. Obviously, the state Shellfish folks were the ones running the show when it came to that. They did their thing, and were able to restore shell fishing at whatever the appropriate date was based on their initial determinations and the town's sampling through that process. From our standpoint, the contract that went out addressed the 16-inch force main by opening it up at various locations along its entire 3.5-mile length to essentially clean it, camera that stretch, each individual stretch, looking for issues. And they actually found quite a few. All told, I think they found and repaired 5 different locations that had some kind of puncture or anomaly within the line. But the initial break that was suffered down on South Beach Street was a failure at a joint from a line that was installed back in the I think it was early 80s. That was a slip line for an original line that went in the it was either the 20s or the 30s. So there's a lot of work that went along that entire stretch, 3.5 miles from C Street pump station all the way to the treatment plant. And along the way, we found all kinds of things that we had to deal with. The contractor worked expeditiously to get the line repaired and back, able to be brought back into service. And then from there, we started to build everything up. And obviously, you had lots of input on how to reconstruct South Beach Street and sidewalks and South Beach Extension to Oak Street. And I think all told, the start to finish to reopen traffic was 111 days total. I'm happy to take questions throughout this, but going to, I think, this gentleman's question about the bridge out on Ames Avenue. We do have some money in this year's budget to start to take a look at all the bridges in town to start to develop plans for condition assessment, essentially. I think my first 6 months, I closed 2 of the 3 bridges in town due to some structural failures. And we were able to bring the repairs to bear to get those back open. But this washover that's occurring in Nantucket is certainly something that we're monitoring. We had the state police, the Mass DOT bridge dive team in after the initial washover to take a look and actually do some measurements, so we have a baseline to follow as far as that goes. But it's something we're monitoring. I'm not overly concerned about it right now, but certainly if it continues and we see continued progression, that's something we're going to have to take into serious consideration. Someone did remind me that the bridge has only been there since the mid-'60s, and so certainly before that, I believe they just utilized the beach to access that whole end of Smith's Point. So I guess worst case scenario, we go back to the 60s and travel along the beach to get access to those remote areas until something else could be brought into bear. Long Pond, you mentioned, Andy. We've initiated a monitoring program above and beyond the state's requirements for the landfill monitoring program to start monitoring for nutrients, nitrates, and such. And that's at an additional cost to the town. Again, just to continue to begin to answer the questions, is the landfill to blame, partly to blame, or not for water quality in the Long Pond area as part of the overall watershed. And I think that was to try to answer the questions that came up before I got here regarding the sewering of Nantucket particularly. So that is continuing, and in fact we're looking to increase the frequency of that sampling and recording for fiscal 19 starting in July. So that's good news. We are recording concentration levels now, but the next contract will include analysis for loading analysis to basically start to take those concentrations to the next level and start to paint the picture based on the data that's received. So that will couple together with natural resources work that's already ongoing in Long Pond, and certainly try to inform the future SMAST report on water quality for that specific area.
Will there be some cooperation with the Land Council with that? Did not Cormac want to be involved with landfill monitoring or the water quality testing there and the test wells? And
I would say we're very open with all parties involved, and I've had meetings with Cormac right along. All of our reports are now available online, and as they get published to the state, we upload them to the DPW website. So those are all available. The folks in Nantucket have retained their own consultant to do reviews of those reports, and we hear from them very regularly. So I think things are going in the right direction. And I'm not sure if any of you attended last year where we did the forum in the fall with regard to the landfill monitoring program. sort of introduce it to all the interested parties and walk through what requirements, the state has for us, what some of the results have been through the years, and start to look at some trends. One of the good things this year, we were able to, through our waste option vendor, we were able to reestablish a well that kind of fell off the radar for a number of years, and I think it sort of troubled both sides, waste options and ourselves. Like, whatever happened here, we didn't have good information on how or what happened to the well. It appears to have gone off when the radio tower was demolished out there on the DPW facility a number of years ago, and so whether it was apparently damaged during that demolition. So we have since reestablished that well testing series nearby, the old site, to sort of bring that back on and fill the gap where that we used to have results from, to bring that back together. So that was good. And as far as stormwater goes, we have just recently gotten approval at town meeting to move forward with some more stormwater management monies. This past year, we've spent most of the monies that we've expended have been related to condition assessment. We we joined with the sewer department to utilize the same closed circuit television pipe camera contractor that came on to start looking at sewer, to start looking at our stormwater system. And so we have lots of voluminous information now to go through and to start to develop what that condition assessment is going to tell us, where the pipes are that are in tough shape, are there breaks, are there other issues. I mean, the biggest thing we're going to need to do in the next 5 years is going to be support what's going on with sewer. As sewer identifies areas that need repairs or replacements, where they identified cross connections to the stormwater system, and where they have roof leaders and sump pumps, etc., utilizing the sewer that need to come offline and be separated. We need to be there with a stormwater system that is vibrant enough to be able to handle those loads that are coming in. So, we're very likely looking to upsize capacity in most of our downtown lines to be able to handle those expected loads. So we're at the very, very early stages of that. And it's more based on condition assessment at this point, looking for those kind of cross-contamination issues or simple breaks that could be under a roadway that are more of a threat to public safety and travel that we'd have to address beforehand. And lastly, I'll jump over to Consu Springs, the project I inherited. We got permits in hand last fall, but we sat down with Land Council, Conservation Foundation, and with the Land Bank, all interested parties for that whole area. And we started to really take a look at what the project entailed. And so we sort of reset the clock there, and we're going for a more robust project. So we worked with our consultants over the winter and met with the various stakeholders at the state and federal level to throw our ideas back at them and say, hey, we want to make a more robust project here than what was already permitted, with the intent that if they said no, that's not possible, that we would immediately move to go to construction on what had been permitted. We were happy to hear that they were supportive of the ideas to make the project a more robust project, and I think that's going to be beneficial for not just stormwater, but real water quality improvements that ultimately translate to the harbor. So that's good news, and kind of comes right on the heels of that successful bike path project that came through. But with that, we of all kinds of invasive species bordering that whole site. And we think that the project that we have coming forward will really help to eradicate a lot of that stuff, to bring in a lot more flow through that area, and might even set up that area for a shellfish sort of pilot project on the land side. So.
Did, through you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Years ago, the plan had been, the last I knew, was to put 2 18-inch culverts in there and restart the tidal flow in there, and they're going to dredge out the pond because there'd been a lot of collected gunk that had flowed down from the watershed and collected there. Is that still part of the plan? Hopefully, to keep that from going into the creeks and into the harbor.
Yes. So the flow pipe is definitely still. It's I can't quote 2 18-inch pipes. It's a single pipe, but
Sure.
There is going to be continued flow there, and the idea is to dredge at a lot more than what was originally proposed. I try to remove and control as much of that invasive species through there by allowing the salt water and sort of that area to really revert back to a much hardier salt marsh.
Because if you let the salt water back in there, the salt water will eventually make the phragmites go away.
Well, it'll control it up to the shoreline,
Right.
and there's a tremendous amount of fresh water that still intrudes, from upstream in the watershed. So we believe we're likely not going to be able to completely eradicate, but we'd be able to control it substantially, mostly with a standing body of water there that will fluctuate tidally.
It's great. It's great. It's been a long time coming.
It's still going to be a bit. I mean, we're basically, I won't say we're completely redesigning this, but we're redesigning it substantially, and we're going to have to restart the clock on the permits process again. But again, I think all the parties involved believe it's the best way to go. Ultimately, going to be a really showcase project.
I'm thinking back to an article in the newspaper where you reported a storm drain full of sand up in was it in the parking lot in Pleasant Street, which also dumps all the way down. That one probably goes into the retention area down near the
Sure.
Great Harbor Yacht Club.
So through this investigation, we found 2 upstream settling tanks, one on Sparks Ave in the school driveway, in the rear driveway to the school, that had in Silver Street parking lot, as you mentioned. So both of those were substantial tanks to the size I've never seen before. I think one was like 6,000 or 8,000 gallons, and the Silver Street one was tremendous, like 10 or 11,000 gallons settling tanks. What we found when we discovered these they were full. I mean, full of sand. So we spent days at each location just removing the sand from them. And what we realized immediately after is the next rain event that we got immediately on Bear Street and some of the others that we saw some pretty substantial flooding. There was so much capacity upstream in cleaning these 2 tanks out that we barely saw any water coming to the surface on some of the tributary areas downstream. There was in Orange Street, the sewer director had identified a cross connection between the stormwater system and the sewer. So one of the big spikes that you would see at the treatment plant during a storm event was because of a cross connection in Orange Street. So that is another one that we are working through to try to figure out how best to improve, especially if we're talking about upsizing pipes. We may end up with, twins at the discharge instead of one massive pipe, just to be able to get around some of the other various utilities that are in those critical areas. of course, crossing Orange Street or any of those the truck route is tedious at best. Being able to schedule it properly and shut those areas down is very sensitive.
My thoughts were relating to the maintenance and obviously neglect and possibly a forgotten tank here and there. Well, what I'm wondering in the long haul is especially with the stormwater runoff and our concerns about how it's getting there and what's in it, and do you have the manpower to maintain it? And I'd just like to offer, I would think the rest of the board would agree that if you felt a program needs to be created through your department for paying attention to these specifically, and you don't have the manpower, that we'd be willing to support you in asking for more manpower for a program like that, and so that you can move forward, make some accomplishments.
Sure.
That
I appreciate that. I'll tell you that the town manager is fully supportive of expanding the staffing for stormwater applicable programs. Out of the gates, I'll tell you that in my investigation, these systems came on. Clearly, they're needed in these particular stretches, which happen to be part of the Constant Springs watershed. But they were done under a different program that the Public Works was not involved with, or if they were, they had a limited role, and they were never flagged or brought on as a operation and maintenance responsibility. So when we found them,
that explains it.
We've been back in, and since then we've cleaned them out again, and so they are part of our system now that we are paying attention to and maintaining. So,
questions from the board?
We had talked at the last meetings that Andy had spoken to you about the potential for collection receptacles for hazardous waste at the landfill all the time, as opposed to having collection days. Is that?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's something that we're definitely going to be taking a look at. But the short answer is, with the vendor contract that's in place through 2025, right now, other than fluorescent bulbs and batteries that are collected at the front, there's not a program in place through Waste Options to be able to, or even a facility to be able to bring in what's normally collected, which is more typically paints, solvents, and other liquid-related household hazardous waste. Not to say that some of those other aren't collected on the day of, but what we're looking to do, and we're running 6 a year now, which is, it's pretty high for the, for a community this size. We can always improve, and we have a fairly consistent. We don't see any spikes. We see a fairly consistent participation through each event, and I think one of the more recent discussions has been related to paints and solvents for paints, and be able to loosen up the hours of acceptance for this and make it more convenient for folks that may not be taking advantage of the days that we hold them, whether they're working or I think they're limited. They have been limited to a single hour window 6 times a year. So I agree. It's just not conducive to letting people come in. So right now, immediately, we're opening it for the full time we're open. We have an off-island vendor that comes on with their staff to collect it for the day. So by the time they're up and running and set up, it's 9 o'clock. We go open 9 to 1, and they pack up and they're off island same day. So we are certainly looking into how the program can improve. The first steps that we can take right away are opening up the hours for commercial and residential throughout the entire stretch, 9 to 1. The next event's on the 16th, and we're looking forward to see how that one goes, and see if we do have an uptick with loosening the hours to see if we have more commercial participation. The next thing that I've begun discussions with the select board regarding is the funding. Right now, we believe it might make sense to loosen up the cost to the contractors as well, and basically waive the fee to collect to allow them to come in for free. I mean, at that point, they're really, between loosening the hours, holding them 6 a year, and making it free, we'll see what kind of feedback we get, what kind of participation we get, and we can start to take a look at potential changes again from there.
It's just the report of the person dumping the can of paint in Wisconsin into the drain made me think of that thing, same type of thing happening within downtown, and the drain draining right into the harbor with some horrible gunk. That's all. Just
It's happening. I can tell you right now, we popped a manhole on South Beach Street a week after that incident in Wisconsin. And David and I mean, it was oppressive, the smell of solvents coming out of the sewer manhole structure that we popped down there. So it's definitely happening. It's an island-wide issue. It's not isolated to Wisconsin.
And I want to say, hopefully on behalf of the board, that we appreciate you coming. And I know it might seem like a stretch for the DPW director to come in and form the Harbor and Shellfish Advisory Board, but we were obsessed with keeping the harbor clean,
Sure.
keeping everybody in business, and
I'm happy to come. I think
the more we know is the better.
what we'll see hopefully in the future is really a measured change, particularly from stormwater discharges. And I think it's been a long time coming. The infrastructure that's downtown is really aged.
And we understand that, so we're hoping to hear this positive news from you. Back to the hazardous waste. Have you thought of any outreach programs to contractors?
Yeah, it's already begun.
Okay.
Yeah, we've had flyers placed in all the retail locations for paint in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. And we've done some, I believe we've done some email outreach as well. Stuff's available on the website as well. But we're sort of taking it to the streets and trying to get the word out to everybody.
That's music to my ears. And now, any way of attaching, like if you were to drop fees, let me back up some. I've been going to Household Hazardous Waste Day since it began. I service my own vehicles, change my own oil. I go to just about every one. Back when it started, the line used to be out to Nantucket Road. And when I go now, there's literally no line. I pull up, it's immediate service. I'm not complaining. It's great to pull in and leave within less than 5 minutes. But I'm wondering about the volume. You mentioned your recording.
Yeah, it's fairly steady these days. I would say in my experience off island, it really depended on the number of events that we were able to hold annually. When I ran two, we tended to have a spike on the second one for the people that sort of missed the first one, and they made sure they put it on their calendar for the second one. But I think household, again, hazardous waste in the home products is sort of that emerging opportunity that people are looking at only in the last 10 years. Prior to that, that stuff would sit on people's shelves. I remember going through, a lot of folks' homes when I was a little kid, and there was all kinds of stuff hanging around the basements. Having no outlet, either people got rid of it into the environment, or they hung on to it if they didn't know, or they were going to use it again. So I think having an outlet for that with these off-island vendors coming in to remove the stuff is fantastic. But a lot of what's going on off-island are these sort of regional centers that are open all the time. People go in and they pay a fee, but they can go in on their schedule, and they pay a fee to unload the stuff. And also, this is about the generators. I don't know the law, what it says about if you purchase oil at a specific vendor. I believe they are obligated under the law to take the waste oil generated back. So I think a lot of folks aren't educated to that point. And if that tends to be people are hanging on to waste oil, for instance, they are they can return it back to the point of sale. And that's true of a lot of different hazardous products, specifically to keep them from going into the environment.
Have you ever tried to put your waste oil back into the containers that the new oil can have?
You don't have to.
Hey, what?
You don't have to. You just put it in any container.
Oh, really? Okay.
But the problem is that there's a contractor, whatever, that comes around to the different, like the Harry's Auto and the different auto shops, picks the stuff up.
Right.
He's not real reliable, and they won't hold the stuff at these parts stores. They'll tell you, well, come back in a few days, see if he's around, and that kind of thing. I've actually got some in my house right now that I haven't been able to get rid of for almost a month because the guy's never around.
Yeah, just wait till the hazmat days and bring my.
Well, this is one of the little glitches, though, is being in a transient town. You've got people who, oh, gee, I'm leaving town in 3 days. I want to get rid of this now, and it's is it ending up in a dumpster somewhere at a job site? And the other thing is at job sites, you've got deadlines. 25 people at one time, if not 35 or 40, working at some of these houses. And I've worked at some myself, and it's amazing what I see going in the dumpster. And I'm wondering if there can be some type of an attachment to the building permit about having a separate container by the dumpster where questionable materials go, or obviously hazardous materials would go, versus just kind of getting tossed over the edge and into the dumpster.
I think you would have to talk to someone in the planning side of things as far as what goes into the building permits. But I would agree with you. Anything we can do to better manage any of these products on site. I know from my own development days that the EPA and DEP all require specific site plans and what they call a stormwater pollution prevention plan that talks all about handling on-site hazardous wastes that are associated with construction, site construction and/or building stuff. So if you're dealing with really any hazardous materials, right down to concrete, when you're done pouring foundations, having specific areas to dump out the concrete to be able to recover that stuff. There's requirements out there, and back to stormwater commitments and regulations. We're starting discussions about introducing a stormwater bylaw and eventually stormwater regulations to really start to address this stuff. Right now, there's not a whole hell of a lot of teeth in anything that exists that I can find within the town's charter or bylaws or regulations. So I took a sample of a discharge coming out of a construction site downtown that I know is tributary directly to the harbor over the winter. Discharging brown right out of a 3-inch hose into one of my catch basins. Had a clear bottle, cleaned it out, took a sample. That sat in my foyer at my house for 3 weeks and never cleared up. And you can only imagine what that was doing to the harbor. And that was discharging 24/7 for weeks. It's just the stuff that's going on that's completely unregulated. They come through my office for a stormwater discharge permit, and we can put requirements on there regarding silt sacks and bags, and getting up to what the level we did for South Beach Street dewatering. We had to actually put it through a frac tank before we discharged it to the harbor. The point is that, there's limitations on our ability to regulate because there's limited or nothing in the code right now. So we're definitely recognize that, and we want to move forward with trying to bring some of that stuff to bear, simply in the interest of water quality protection, and mostly to the harbor. There's intense renovation work that goes on, as you know, particularly in the downtown. And when that's going on, and there's any kind of site work going on with dewatering involved, that stuff gets handled really all over the map. Some people are as responsible as they can be, given the methods that they've either developed or been shown, and others are. I went to one today that was discharging directly to a site in the downtown and leaving a trail of silt that had to go over 100 yards down the road into a catch basin.
So are you saying that there's no regulation on dewatering a construction site? Or minimal at best?
Very minimal at best. And beyond that, if we kick it up a notch into EPA required permit, you're talking about red tape that is extremely tedious. So,
most of those, I would imagine, have Concom approval.
I would say almost none of them.
No, as far as the construction itself, they must be in an area where they got Concom approval for the construction, but the discharge of the dewatering is not being...
Not necessarily. There's a lot of downtown that's not subject to wetlands protection.
But yet is still in a dewatering area.
Yep. And particularly, winter, and this winter, we were dealing with high groundwater levels that I think water company has told me that they've never seen before. Mm-hmm. So a lot of dewatering going on, and beyond the dewatering, there was some pumps, and so there's just a lot of water moving around.
Board members, while we have Mr. McNeil here, is it too early to make a connection with the landfill in Long Pond and the testing that's taken place since you've been here?
Yeah, with respect to the specific constituents that we're now testing for, I would say it's very, very too soon. We're going to need a body of knowledge to really look back at. But it's good that we're starting to collect the concentrations now. I think this next year, I'm not sure how far. I would say, Andy, that how many years of this that we're going to have to take a look at before we can make that determination. All I can tell you is we're testing, and we'll let the experts look at the data and tell us what their interpretation is.
Do you find mulch to be a big problem with the storm drains?
Mulch?
People over mulching and
honestly, I haven't heard mulch being a major issue this year. I've seen it in my career, especially when it goes down fresh and you get a big rain. But I haven't seen it as a major clogging of catch basins this year. I think most people know to wipe it away and take care of it.
Mr. Chairman, question?
yes.
Is there a way to get a list of exactly what's tested for in terms of the effluent from the landfill?
Yeah, that's
pond?
all in the reports.
It is?
There's a
Okay.
complete list of everything that's tested for. It's all state required.
Is it on the town website?
It is.
Okay.
Yep, right through DPW, under the solid waste heading.
Okay.
Curtis?
Yeah, I would just want to like to follow up on your comment about maybe planning department ought to get involved in some of the commercial and residential construction site area. I also happen to sit on the planning board, and I'd be happy to bring that up at a meeting, either at the planning board or the planning commission.
Sure.
Which I presume would require or should include the DPW planning department, Concom, I don't know, maybe the Department of Health, I don't know whether they'd be
Yeah,
involved or not. Would you be
I would
willing
say-
to participate in any kind of discussions?
Yeah,
we
I
might-
think there's in my career in public works, 10 years now, I would say that anytime anything like this is going on, coordinating, and I'm talking about impacts that are specific to growth, right? Specific to development and or renovation work. And you see it usually comes in cycles. Cycle here seems like it's endless, but the cycle exists out there. You start to see periods of more intense impacts than others. I'm always looking at the practical side of things, and how is a decision that's being made let's say at a planning board level, how is that and more particularly something that the town then takes ownership of at the end of the project, right? So then that brings responsibilities to my department that may include operation and maintenance of catch basin, stormwater system, could be cleaning out a detention basin, could be roadway sweeping, plowing, etc. So when we start looking at materials and specifications for construction, those are the sort of things that I pay attention to because they ultimately affect my department down the road. And it could be 10 years down the road, could be immediately, 6 months from the end of construction or something along those lines. So I love to give, feedback back to those boards and their directors and have through my career to just say, if we could start to look at changing those regulations from your end, they're going to benefit the town or my department specifically in these ways.
Great.
So I'm happy to have those discussions, and I do.
I'll bring the issue up in the
I
next
talk with Intervorce and with Mike Burns and a lot of cases on a lot of these different projects. We're now sitting together and conceptualizing a lot of the transportation projects that are being planned. So there's a lot more coordination between departments. I think it's more at the point where we're talking about building permits and site plan approvals, and there's certain thresholds that require site plan approval. And there's a whole category of folks that are falling below that are contributing to these issues such as dewatering. They may not get site plan approval because of the size of the project, but yet they still have the potential to have those intense impacts during their excavation or dewatering. They still are likely using some levels of household or commercial hazardous waste materials on the site. Even if it's a smaller project, it may be less intense than a much larger site plan project, but a lot of those same issues exist.
I could certainly see, obviously, most construction's supposed to start with a building permit. So if you can start at that end with not only education, but also specific requirements or agreements or whatever it might be. Ultimately, you come to the point of then what do they do with it and how do they get rid of it and what's the process?
Our biggest challenge frequently is not just lack of regulations, it's having any oversight. Any oversight. The permits we issue, it's good faith. We review them, we sign them, we talk to the contractors about expectations, and we do not have staff that's available to go out and do any inspection. So that's a major challenge. That's a break in the system.
Well, it seems to me that it's probably something that is a significant issue, and it's one that's probably not easy to remedy quickly, but that doesn't mean it's not worth the effort.
And we're pursuing that.
Okay.
Great.
Rob?
Thank you so much. All right.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Rob, thank you very much.
Good luck with your meetings.
Did you have a question? Quickly, I got to allow the public.
You mentioned a potential shellfish project in the Thompson Springs. Is that
Yeah, that's something that Natural Resources would be involved with. I don't know in particular, it's just something that maybe part of the sort of offset mitigation project. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks. Sorry about that, Colin. Back to old business, goals and objectives. Maybe some of what we've heard tonight will have an effect on what we may be moving forward with here. Ideas for our upcoming year here. So, unless somebody has any thoughts on where we've been and where we're going.
Well, I do note that we had alternative mooring systems here with the hope to set a pilot project for the 2017 season. And obviously we didn't get 17 and we're not getting 18, so maybe 19 we can make some progress. On that issue, I sort of giving some thought about it, and really the question of whether it could be simply by providing some education and information about the alternative systems. Maybe you start from the consumer level and see whether you can get it to work backward to the supplier level, and with obviously focusing on probably the shallower mooring areas, and just see whether you can get homeowners, boat owners to, with education, see whether they might be interested in an alternative system, and then see if you can exert pressure going backwards to the system to accomplish it that way. Simply a thought. I mean, obviously the approach could be at the yacht clubs, some information sessions and materials handed out, maybe even a vendor coming, not necessarily a local vendor, but maybe an alternative mooring manufacturing vendor actually coming and seeing whether that sparks any interest or concern at all. I would think it would generate some, but anyway. And then continue to push to see whether we can do it on a more formal basis through the town and Sheila with a pilot program.
And getting mooring handlers on board.
Yeah, and that, I don't have a solution for that one.
Well, now, hence your approach, working backwards from the consumer, and which, to me, initially sounds like
a fertilizer issue where you get, through education, you get the consumer to ask the vendor, why don't you have nitrogen compliant fertilizers for slow release? I mean, I think that may have some positive effect, at least at some level.
Well, as I mentioned before, I was talking with a mooring handler who was actually in favor of helix moorings, though he does not have the equipment to install them, but said if they became more popular or a requirement in a certain area, he'd be willing to make the investment. And in talking more a bit with some people about the helix and how they're placed, and Sheila's concern about fetching up on them, first of all, several scallopers have said, if you're fetching up, your normal reaction would be to pull back on the throttle, and you're not going to sink. But let's eliminate that altogether. Bury the helix so it's below grade, keeping a stainless steel type of indicator that is above, that can be dragged over a little chunk of chain that's just above the surface so it can be found and located. There has to be a better locating system for them so they don't need a cap, so they can be buried below the mud and still be, to me, it seems like the most useful mooring there is, eliminating chain altogether.
Yeah. My discussion with the harbor master in Marion was that they mandate helix moorings for any boat over 25 feet. And that's primarily, it's not an eelgrass issue, that's primarily a safety issue, dragging, and the effect of one of the storms 20 years ago, what it did to all the boats with moorings failing. And so that certainly, it seems to me, could be a solution in those areas where you have many boats and not a whole lot of scalloping, which Children's Beach, that whole mooring area, certainly would be ripe for that. It's you got tons of boats in there. They're constantly interfering with one another. It's supposed to be gridded, but you got a lot of people who just come in and drop their own sort of any place they want to. So certainly from a safety point of view, that I think that would be an improvement and something that doesn't affect the scallopers, because I presume there's not many of them that are scalloping right there in that along Easton Street. And maybe even in the deeper water moorings. But I was thinking more of the shallower moorings out along Monomoy, where you can actually see the bottom and you can actually see the mooring. You can probably, at low water, you could probably stand there and grab the bottom of the chain, so it doesn't become the issue of how do we get the mooring up out of the water if you've got some sort of a expandable type mooring. I think that's really more where I'm talking about. And initially, maybe you don't have to have a fixed bottom. Maybe that can still continue to come out. You just have a top that doesn't have chain on it, or much chain on it. So those are my thoughts. But definitely, again, Marion has had 20 years of experience with helix moorings. They have multiple handlers. And they deal with the issue by requiring every helix mooring that goes in to having a GPS coordinate associated with it and filed with the harbor master. So I don't know how close you can get on a GPS, but I think you can get it within a few fairly short, small area. So anyway.
So there's one thing we'll keep on our priority list for
and
sure.
That's something I may just tackle partly on my own, just trying to see whether we can, just through my relationships with certain of the boat owners or whatever, just to try to educate through just interpersonal discussions and see whether you can see what kind of take you get.
Fritz, you've been an advocate for this since you got here, and I want to encourage you to continue with it.
Yeah, I don't, I'm not asking the board to do anything other than be aware and obviously support it.
Well, I don't want you to be discouraged because of our goals for 2017. Other comments from board members on?
Should we maybe change that priority level to high for number 5?
Yeah.
Unless there's any objection, just do it with a vote.
Yeah. I don't know whether this is. Did you notice whether this was? Is this a PDF or was this just Word?
It's PDF.
It was a PDF.
Was it PDF?
I don't know. I mean,
Yeah,
I've got this. I've got this on my computer, so I certainly the Word version on mine.
But you have Adobe Acrobat. With Adobe Acrobat, you can manipulate your PDFs so the cows come home. You can edit them, which means you can take something that anybody gives you and manipulate it, or you can sign it, or whatever. Just saying, you're planning.
That I don't know, but
Planning board member, you should probably have Adobe Acrobat. Worth the investment.
it's probably on my town computer, which right now I use for planning matters. But anyway.
Goals and priorities. Any more thoughts, ideas, board members?
Well, it says right here, staring me in the face, that Peter Brace was supposed to write a letter to the Board of Selectmen regarding the establishment of implementation committee. I don't recall ever doing that. I remember Tara Riley and Jeff Carlson at different times telling us that they were trying to get this revived, and maybe they were going to be advertising for committee members. I also remember at least a year ago or more, Jeff Carlson or Tara Riley telling us that the implementation of the Shellfish Management Plan was like 40% done. So maybe it'd be a good idea to find out how much more done it is, and find out from them, is it still important to get a committee together to get this implemented?
And I did go in to the town office and filled out the form for my interest. So, but I never heard anything.
Was that before you joined this board?
No.
Okay.
Was that a committee that just could not come together for lack of
They just couldn't
interest?
I don't think they ever.
Get volunteers.
I don't think they ever. I don't know whether it was lack of volunteers or whether it was just lack of interest, movement. I mean, doing something.
Well, they couldn't get. They put out an ad looking for people to join that committee, and not enough people put in applications. I do know people that would like to do it, so we could reach out to them, or we could. I don't know. I guess it would be good to hear from Tara or Jeff. Maybe the next time Jeff comes back, we could ask him what the status of that is. Did they think that the committee doesn't need to be implemented because maybe a lot of the tasks have been completed?
I think he's informed us of this, but
yeah,
we need
last
to be
time he was saying
reminded.
they were like 40% done, but that was at least a year ago. I'd say maybe a year and a half to 2 years ago. So,
Yep.
okay.
I mean, as far as I know, 2 and 3, obviously, waiter safety. Sheila did that
Yep.
video on
The Dreamland.
at the Dreamland. Stormwater runoff. We're just that's obviously ongoing. Alternate systems. Alternate mooring, eelgrass restoration.
what were we going to do about what was our discussion on the nub regulation?
Oh,
I think we were.
this says requires state action. on
I
my
think we were
comments.
of the mind that it was going to take a lot to do that, because it would be a state. The state would have to change its.
Well, a lot was went through to get it there.
Right.
So I think
The
maybe
conversation had to do with, when the state shellfish biologist Mike Hickey came down, when there was the nub issue and nobody would go fishing because they had said everybody, there were so many nubs in the water that year. It was like 2008, and they had the big meeting over there at 2 fairgrounds. Am I about right? 2008, and there were like 60 scallopers there, and not Keith Conant, but Steve Mercer was the shellfish biologist at the time, and Mike Hickey came down, and they said, okay, the ruling is you can take a scallop that has a growth ring that's about the size of a penny, 10 millimeters, and then, or it can be 2.5 inches from the hinge up, and they came up with this plastic nylon ring, and if it was bigger than the ring, but you couldn't take it, and that's the standard for now. And so yeah, and I remember Mike Hickey saying, somebody getting up, like Smitty got up and said, "Well, can we change this?" Because I think he was going up to hearings at the Division of Marine Fisheries and speaking up and trying to get Nantucket heard. And at that meeting over there at 2 fairgrounds, Mike Hickey said, we want to collect more data. We want, X number of years, 10 years or 5 years or more data before we make a change. Of course, you can come back and try to make a change, but so I don't think it should come off the list, but I don't know. I know that'll be a challenge for us. Plus, we need our scallopers to come in and tell us that they want us to do that.
Well, you can make the rules more strict, but you can't make them less strict than the state regulations.
Right.
But the nubs were never an issue until this 2008, and I mean, since then, has there been questionable nub growth lines that have?
Who you ask?
I'm sorry.
Depends on who you ask.
Yeah. Your opinion. I'm asking you.
No, I don't think so. No.
Yeah.
Everybody should know the difference between an adult and a seed. I mean,
Right.
no.
Well, and then there was.
Probably on a residential basis, there's a big. What's a no?
Oh boy.
I would argue it's more of an issue for recreational scalpers, people who don't know, who don't scalp every day, and they go, "Oh, this is a big fatty." You know,
Well, but then
realizing that's 1 year.
Then you add in, is it Beverly Hall? She's a doctor. She's involved in the Shellfish Association. She was working on studying whether
Beverly Hall, not the photographer.
No, who's Valerie? Thank you.
Yeah.
Val. Sorry, was working on studying on her own to try to. She feels that the scallop can possibly spat twice, which to me would mean it's going to live 3 years and possibly have a second growth ring. So, it just makes me, I don't think a second growth ring has ever been discovered. If to prove a scallop spats twice and lives 3 years is, to me, very difficult, but I think it kind of started with the nub being maybe in a different growth cycle or something like that. With
The fall spawn scallops.
Yeah.
And then they go into dormancy and you get whatever size it grew to, being that nub.
Well, it would be interesting to know if she's come to any conclusions, because that was over a year ago. She was talking about that at NSA.
Is she a member of NSA? Does she go to meetings?
Not lately. I didn't make it to the last one, but I haven't seen her or her husband there in the past several meetings that I've been able to attend.
We should reach out to her and see.
Yeah.
See if she'd be interested in coming to talk to us.
You noting that?
Yeah.
Thank you, Peter. To back up a little, go, a little less organized here. Did you have any comment you'd like to make on the moorings that we were talking about? I'm sorry.
I'm good on more.
All right.
I had just one. I mean, I don't want to interrupt you, but
No, please.
okay. A couple of meetings ago, we discussed in some way, I don't remember exactly how it came up, some sort of a internship program for people who sort of learn how to scallop, high school kids learning how to scallop or learning how to become involved. Somehow we were discussing it.
I floated the idea at my re-election campaign, and still have not gone to visit with Dr. Bucky yet, but just wondering about a school to work program.
Let me just tell you what I found out. So,
good.
Egan Maritime obviously runs in the 8th grade, and we fund most of the salary of a teacher who is providing maritime type nautical education as a part of the curriculum, where they build in actually was part of the math program, the science program, other things, is dealing with various aspects of things like wave generation they study and stuff like that. And then we and Egan is because of its interest in maritime careers and backgrounds, the Sea of Opportunities program really focuses on what can we do to provide or educate local school kids about what opportunities there might be in the maritime world for jobs, whether it be anything from engine maintenance to harbor pilot to steamship ferry captain, the merchant marine, whatever, it's just sort of the whole spectrum. And scalloping obviously falls within that in terms of a fishing trade. And so I mentioned it to Pauline Proch, and she said that the place for that to start would be at the high school and I can't remember her name. There is a coordinator at the high school for these intern-type programs. And that certainly from the school's point of view, it could probably work. The task would then be probably identifying one or more or a group of scallopers who would be willing to participate in any kind of a program that puts a high school kid on their boat for some purpose. So I think that's if it's something that is to be pursued, and I don't know necessarily by whom, whether that would be us, Nantucket Scholars Association, whatever. If you sort of got the school side, I think, is in place. It takes the other end of who's actually going to be doing, handling the quote intern. And so I just wanted to get back to you that I had sort of followed up, and that's kind of what I came back with.
It was you said you knew somebody through the yacht club, a scalper, correct? Or was it Jeff?
Oh, it was Harvey.
Somebody who would be good for that.
Yeah, Harvey, what's Harvey's last name? Scalloper, part-time scalloper. He's drives a school bus and is a launch man. Works at the Nantucket Yacht Club in the summertime on the waterfront, driving launch and whatever. So I mean, he might be someone who might be interested in doing. He deals with school kids. Obviously, he drives a school bus, so
And he invites everybody out to go.
Yeah. So I mean, I could mention it to Harvey as to see whether this would be anything that would
It'd be good
of
to
interest.
poll fishermen and see how many would be involved before anybody approaches Dr. Bucky, really, or whoever
Yeah.
would handle this at the school.
Yeah, and I don't know. Maybe you.
We have one scalloper here. Would you be willing? Would you entertain the thought of taking an intern on board and introduce them to the world of scalloping?
I kind of like it quiet out there.
I know. Or is it more about the gag order of, where you getting the scallops and they're not revealing?
It's a long day, man.
Yeah.
I have to go to school.
Oh, I can remember going with my dad and asking him, "When's the last tow, Dad? When's the last tow?" And then finally he just about backhand me, "Don't ask me again." So
I guess the beginning question is: do we feel that that there's a need to try to somehow develop a next generation of scalloper? I don't, maybe it's something that there are enough people who just introduce themselves to it. I
You
don't
hope
know.
that it evolves, but and I suppose so far it has. But today's youth, I feel, need all the encouragement for outdoor activities as they can possibly get.
Yeah, and it wouldn't necessarily have to be a big program, formal program.
Right.
If you can get one or
Yeah.
two people to
Yeah,
even
that's
participate,
it.
at least there is.
I mean, only one goes to the Ford garage for a school to work program.
Yeah, right.
And there are very few that do school to work anymore. It used to be huge, and back in the 70s and early 80s, it was that was everybody left at noon to go to work for a contractor. Lots of kids did. Joe.
Having been an educator, I would do this the other way around. Find out how many kids are interested in doing it, because you may come up with a zero.
Yeah.
You may put up all this effort to set up the program and then not have anybody volunteer. But if you go to ninth graders and you say, hey, look, in a year from now, would you be interested in going out on a scallop boat? You might get one, you might get two. Then you don't have to find as many people to participate in the project. And you may have two people who want to do it very willingly. Just the concept. I mean, dealing with kids is like herding cats. You know, you can give them an opportunity, but they are not interested, so they won't take it. But if you say, is anybody looking for the opportunity, you can then retrofit it. It's just a different way of looking at things.
No, well, that's,
I mean, it's
that's
cheaper,
what I've been
it's-
hoping for, to get input from all of you, and that's perfect. That could be an announcement in the school announcements in the morning, and if there's no response by the end of the day, then
Right, because I think it takes a special
Yeah.
person to want to take a kid out in a boat to scholar.
Yeah.
You know,
Definitely.
if you're out there to be in the quiet, you don't want somebody going, hey, what's this? Hey, what's that? And there are other people who are going to eat that up. I mean, I could see Carl Sherlin doing that. I don't know, this other person,
Harvey, yeah.
Harvey.
Well, I
but,
could
you
see
know, I
both
think
of
it's
them.
just a different way of looking at the project rather than building something and not having participation. Find the participants and then build it around them.
But you're going to have to come up with something concrete so that when you announce it, if somebody does ask, we have to tell them what it's all about and not just come up with it as we get people.
No, I
Yeah.
mean, we have to have a concept of
He
what
gave
we
a
want
year
to do.
in
I mean, just do it a
Yeah.
year in advance. I mean, that way you don't have to waste a lot of energy doing something that people aren't going to use. You know, it's
No, that makes sense. I like it, Joe.
you know, I
Yeah.
just my
It
way of
definitely
doing
has a
things.
way it has to come together, but to ask a ninth grader if they'd be interested in doing that their following year in the sophomore year, of course, the attention span doesn't last that long, you know.
So
But
this would be what 12th and 11th grade that they do it.
I would have to say it should be older. Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
so
yeah.
then instead of 9th, do it in
Yeah.
the 10th. But, you know, there's going to be somebody who's going to say, yeah, I want to do this. And, you know, you get them to commit. Maybe you get them to participate in building it. What do you want to get out of it? You know, all these projects with education these days are about giving kids opportunities to see ways of applying what they learn. You know, I mean, there's a lot of what's taught in school these days that's an abstraction. You know, a train's leaving Denver and it goes 60 miles an hour, and there's a train coming from who cares? But what are the practical uses of, you know, geometry? How does that work in dredging something? You know, there's ways of making this work differently. That's all I'm saying.
Depth of the water, length of the line.
Right. You know, I mean, those are the things. I mean, and that's all practical use of what you learn in school. But when it's an abstraction, it's totally meaningless. You know.
I wonder whether they have a program with the hatchery.
There'd be another place.
Tara, I wonder whether any kids go down there to learn about
I'm all over it.
propagation and all that.
Peter Boyce
Not me.
always took on interns. Who was on our board, Dr. Peter Boyce. He always took on interns in the summer when he was doing shellfish research on the harbor, doing the spat bags, you know, packing the spat bags with monofilament and collecting them, and whatever he was working on, he always had high school interns. And I think they might have interns. I'm not sure. At the hatchery.
Let me check with. I'll check with Tara, but I think. I mean that definitely fits right into the science program,
Right.
right?
She
Yeah.
has summer interns.
Yeah,
She gets summer, but not.
Yeah.
yeah, but not school year.
Okay. Well, I'll follow it up casually.
You want the description of what this is going to be clear and concrete, because you don't want to get the kids that are going, hey, I can get out of class. You know? I like going on the water with Kona. Yeah, that's cool.
Be tortured.
Well,
Or learn to
one
be a
week is
man,
going
real
out on
quick.
the 1 week is going out on the boat, and the next week is opening scallops in the sack.
Well, the first requirement is being at the dock at sunrise. So just before sunrise, and that eliminates a lot of kids from showing up at the wood shop at 7:30 to work for a carpenter. It really eliminates a lot of people. They can't get up. So that would be the first
I think
hurdle.
all these ideas, if you have sort of an outline of what you think you want to do, but instead of pouring all the energy into building it,
Yeah.
find out if somebody, and have the kid be involved in building the program. Because that's how they'll attract kids the following year. You know, there's that, oh, well, that was really fun. I had a great time. And then two other kids are going to say, oh, you know, I'll give that a whack.
Yeah, we could learn from Sheila's junior lifeguard program.
Right.
Now she's already got people coming in and being full-fledged lifeguards.
Exactly.
Of course, that's on the beach in the summertime.
Right, but, you know, there's
It's better than scalloping in the wintertime at 6 o'clock in the morning.
you know, we all go out at 6.
There are fringe benefits. of
Yeah,
being a
yeah,
lifeguard.
But Andy, I'll make sure that I do
I
much
like
more
the idea.
verbatim note taking when I go through the minutes in this section, so we have
Okay.
documentation.
Yeah, all right. Thank you. Well, I'd still like to keep a close eye on how things move forward with the hazardous waste outreach and public education and any other, you know, I can't wait to see what Rob says they're already distributing. And I think we should all take a look at that and see if there's anything there that, you know, needs to be added to. Any suggestions we could make to help make it as effective as possible, because I think it's something that has just been, we've been complacent with. Here's our program. This is what we do, and we hope everybody realizes it. So, that's something I'd like to see stay on there. Emergency public boat ramp is just, I think about it every day. And you know, if dredging wasn't so difficult, I just actually discovered a private boat ramp that is actually, you know, right next to land bank property that it could work at high tide. I mean, these people have been using it for 3 generations.
Where's this?
Otisons have their own ramp.
Yeah.
And, you know, they launch their own boats into the Hither Creek there, into the creeks over here. And right next door is what used to be Mike Backman's property. The land bank built a big pier there, but it's for viewing. It's not for dockage.
Is this boat ramp paved or concrete, or is it just
Concrete slabs.
It is.
2 tire track slabs. And you know, that's actually land bank property now also, but they have life right to live there. But it would require, to be used at any tide, would require dredging into the creeks. And from what we've just heard from Deputy Chief Gibson, I spoke with him in length the other day about dredging, and the town has hired an engineering study. The engineering company is FOTH/CLE, FOTH/CLE. They're out of Marion, Mass, and they'll be studying Pulpus Harbor and Hither Creek. Pulpus being the priority, but it sounds like they're starting at Hither Creek from what he just told us tonight. They're having a problem, like he said, with where they dump the spoils, and they want to offer it to people who have lost beach. But if you take these spoils, it's public sand being put on private property. You have to give a permanent easement of your property, your beachfront, to be used by the public because you took advantage of this public sand. So as you heard him say, nobody in Pulpus wants to sign on to it.
Yeah.
Well, I tell you, I guess they can hydraulically move the sand up to 4,000 feet in a pipe. Otherwise, it has to be moved by barge, taken to Steamboat Wharf, taken off the barge onto trucks, and trucked to, as you heard him say, to the landfill for storage. You know, actually, if somebody looked into it, where's the access? I mean, if you took this sand, how are they going to access that beach? They have to have access, and if you don't have, I think there's some loopholes in it that Charlie may not be considering. And also with the dredging, because in just looking at the Vineyard Gazette and seeing this dredge that they've owned for the last 9 years, and reading the story about them dredging the Edgartown Great Pond and able to move 120 tons of sand per day with this machine, he said, and they've been using it for 9 years now. And he says, I don't know how they've gotten permitted, because we were permitted to move 8,000 cubic yards of sand out of Pulpus Harbor. Now that it's shoaled in some more, we need to move more than that, hence get a the permit has to be adjusted to move more sand, so they can't move forward at all. And I feel like our hands are tied on dredging, but every time I go over to Hyannis, I see this little excavator on a barge digging muck out from the marina area for 2 years straight now. And then they dump it, they transfer it from the dumpster he has on his barge over into a corral in a parking lot right next to the Steamship Authority. And it's been going on. The machine's still sitting over there. I saw it just last week, and they've got it tied up in front of Hyannis Marina, and I guess it'll sit there for the summer, and they'll probably continue work next year, because the big cement blocks that they put on the parking lot to corral the muck when he transfers it, and then it gets moved by another excavator into a dump truck and trucked off who knows to where. But
I'm sure it has an ongoing permit, a standing permit for a certain period of time.
And maybe it's under maintenance dredging. So I just hope, Charlie seemed like, and if he was here, I'd still say this, that he said this kind of just all got put on my desk. Now that Dave Franzuto's gone, it's in Charlie's hands to deal with the dredging. And it sounds like he's done a lot of research, and he's actually kind of maybe burned out by it. But
Did he say that the regulation, or that the public access issue, is that's local, state? Where does that come from?
state?
Yeah, but it doesn't seem like the landowner is really benefiting from it as much as the town is benefiting from it. They might be getting it, but the town wants them to get it. It's not like they're just listening to the town to get the sand. So they shouldn't necessarily.
Well, there are areas that have eroded, and the people would like to have the sand, but they don't want to give public access to their property, so they're not going to take it. And so now, unfortunately, what they're looking into also is dumping all these spoils outside the harbor somewhere. Like our channel was recently dredged, and they use a hopper dredge that takes all the spoils out and releases them in the Carter of the Bay someplace, or out in front of Dionis. And to me, that's a huge waste when this sand came off of high ground and ought to be put back up there somehow. But I asked him if he was, confronting the Conservation Foundation about, dumping any on CO2, and he said he's actually involved in some conversations like that now, but it's questionable where they're sending it from if it exceeds 4,000 feet to where it would go to hydraulically move it in a pipe. I'm sorry?
Using it for public beaches.
Yeah.
They can't stage it off of a beach. They have to transfer it into a barge, bring the barge to Steamboat Wharf, shovel it off the barge at Steamboat Wharf, bring it, and then truck it to the beaches somehow. So it's not as easy as you think.
I made mention, we're in the middle of the discussion, that I had heard Dave Franzuto talk about dredging of Pulpus Harbor and a master plan for 10 years. Mm-hmm. The talk that he gave in Nantucket, I had the good fortune of pilfering from him. He sent it to me. And just what we're talking about here, here's the Pulpus Harbor entrance channel dredge plan. There's a slide. Sandbank storage area. One is stockpile the DPW yard, which would cost them nothing other than to get it there. The other one was the alternative, which was stockpile area, vacant lot, New South Road, that they could use to stage to drop the sand. Now, here's the problem. This is the talk he gave in Nantucket, which was basically about Ames Ave. We then talked about it, and I will, let's see if I can find it. Give me a second here. Notes from the SHAB meeting. Damn it. SHAB meeting. So this was the meeting posting, because when I looked it up, I looked up Dave Franzuto, dredging plan, Nantucket Harbor and Nantucket Harbor and Nantucket Harbor. We had it on our agenda that he was supposed to talk to us. It was posted, the day was June 20th, 2017, and right here it says, Harbor dredging schedule, Dave Franzuto. So he must have been here, because I distinctly remember him telling us.
Yeah, we did have him here. He did.
Yeah, he talked about this, and he told us that there was a master plan for the entrance to the harbor, there was a master plan for Pulpus Harbor, and over 10 years. And rather than doing it every 10 years, he had set up this idea where you would drift it to every 3. So you would permit once for 10 years. You would do, let's say, Hither Creek year 1, Nantucket Harbor year 2, Pulpus Harbor year 3, and then start again and not have to re-permit and do one major dredge every 10 years, which I remember him saying, is far, far more expensive than moving a small amount of sand out of where you are. So if there's any way, I mean, can we check those minutes? Because I didn't find them in my notes. I didn't start saving them until recently so that I could refer to them.
What year was it? I mean, what's
The date was
June 20th, 2017.
yes, June 22. Thank you. I'm glad one of us.
June 25th,
And it was,
2017.
And what I pulled this off of, because I didn't have it, I pulled this off of the town website as posted meetings, past posted meetings.
June 20th?
Yeah, 17.
Was I secretary then?
We were both here.
I'll look to see
So
if I've got
that was the
those
best that
records.
I could do. I legitimately thought I had asked him for that talk that he did here, the 5-minute talk he did, and I never got around to it. But the one in Nantucket, he actually sent me the slides, and that's how I have it on my computer. But that was part of, as I was roaming through things today, looking for things, I found the document, the 40-page document that goes through every type of anchored mooring known to mankind, who the distributor is.
Yeah, I got
who
I
the
got that.
distributor is, who the local representatives are. Another one on eelgrass restoration and NOAA grants, which I remember I talked about briefly, and I was actually not in favor of trying to replant eelgrass because of the project when they did the new runway at Logan. The new runway was going to go right through one of the best beds of eelgrass in Boston Harbor. So they decided that they were going to dig it up and move it someplace else. 98% of it died.
Yeah, I heard that.
It's one of those things that if the water isn't right, it's just
Yeah. Well, and Cormac has explained that to us. Jeff
Right.
Carlson has explained that to
so
us. That
just as this was just I sort of went and looked for
I
all
think if
these
the
things.
water clears up, then the eelgrass is going to take care of itself.
That's one of the things. But the other side is that you have to take care of the water quality first before you can
Yeah.
transplant the eelgrass.
Yes.
And if people are dumping toluene and methyl alcohol, methanol, and all these solvents into the ground, I'm sorry, this is sand. And that stuff has little or no adherence
Yeah.
to anything.
Yes.
It's going to wind up in the water, if not today, 5 years from now. But ultimately, it's going to get there. And again, I didn't have the presence of mind to ask the DPW head. The question is, where do the commercial guys dump their stuff if it only happens every 2 months? I mean, these 15,000 square foot houses, they must be using 100 gallons of paint. Where do those go? sure the hell aren't putting cat litter in them and saving them in their basement.
I tell you what,
Latex.
just the samples of paint alone. You see a painter show up with samples and just put a little bit on the wall so the client can decide, and then decide what you want in the house. I'm telling you, the volume, and unless you actually witness it, you would not believe the volume.
Andy,
So-
I'm all over it with
Yeah.
you. I mean, that amazes me. I didn't have the presence of mind to say that. What happens to those 100 gallons of paint from one house? I mean, there's 5 houses
Well, it's supposed to
up-
be applied to the house.
Yeah, but what do you do with the cans? And what do you do? I saw this at my house when we did our renovation, standing outside at 4 o'clock with wet brushes, having been dipped in turpentine,
Yeah.
and then taking the can and just pitching it.
Well, a lot more is latex water-based now, but my concern is really, how safe is latex paint for the environment?
Who knows?
They don't accept it at Household Hazardous Waste Day. You're told to leave the can open and let it dry. That takes a long time. So that now you start putting kitty litter in there, and you're supposed to throw it in bulky. And,
So where does that go?
well, bulky gets shipped off island with C&D. All the bulky goes into the C&D building, crushed up, mixed up with C&D, and shipped off. But it's the leaking dumpsters on the job sites that if a half gallon of paint isn't needed, and is it going in the dumpster? All the dumpsters are set up tilted so the rainwater flows out of them.
Now,
So anything else that's a liquid is flowing out of there also.
I would also
And-
encourage all of you, if you have Amazon, if you can stream an Amazon movie, watch a movie called The Sand Wars. It will absolutely blow your mind.
Sand wars.
Sand Wars. It's about the fact that we're running out of sand for construction.
You need this room, Bo? 7 o'clock?
What countries are doing
Okay.
We're almost
to get
done.
sand.
Yeah, we showed.
They showed it at the Dreamland. I watched it at home because I couldn't go to the
The
Dreamland.
Nantucket Coastal Conservancy showed it at the Athenaeum.
I'm sorry, it was at the Athenaeum, right.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is I couldn't go, and I just, I Googled it, and it said it was streaming on Amazon, and it's free. If you have Amazon Prime, it's free.
yeah.
Watch it. You will be mortified.
All right. Shall we continue our goals and objectives discussion
I got off on
for the next meeting?
Sure.
Next meeting, a regular meeting or workshop meeting? Thoughts on that? I mean, I like to hear from staff, and I think we can create a workshop even if it's a regular meeting.
Right.
If we could get a workshop meeting that was more in handlers, because that's what we were talking about
Yes.
in the minutes meeting at the second meeting in June, because we thought they might be a little slower.
You can get them here.
Does
You guys can get them.
maybe you're not going to get the guys from the island, but maybe we should have one meeting and invite 2 people that represent moorings that are used in this area that
My thought.
off island. Let them come talk to us. Let them do the pros and cons. Record the info. Then have them come back and say to these guys, look, either you come or, somebody else is going to start putting them in. I mean, it's entirely feasible.
Any other items you can think of, board members, that you'd want to have on next meeting agenda?
I'll try
to
to
briefly bring up again the green crab issue that we, this is on, of course it isn't on this because we started looking at it after this was printed up. And that idea I had for the containment that's already in the boat basin to try to filter the water there. I'll do some research on that and give a report.
Okay. Great.
19th is next meeting.
Yep.
Yes.
Anybody else?
Are we at public questions and comment?
Yes.
And I'd just like to say, to Ken Coons, welcome back. We're really glad to have you back.
Indeed.
We've missed you on the board.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for making the effort and coming back.
Sure.
And your input has been missed. So,
Well, I'll
Thank you.
talk and make up.
yeah. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor?
Right.
Aye.